Welcome back to Jason's Ukulele Book, the video series. Now these notes are, again, mostly to help guide you through the book. They're not to take the place of the book, so I'm not going to just read everything that I already wrote on the page. That would be incredibly boring if you've got the book. But to help you understand why sections are there and to explain some of the things I might teach if we were in person, if you already had the book. So we're picking it up here on page 22. We're going to talk about the circle of fifths, and we don't want to get too crazy into music theory because then it just gets kind of muddled and bogged down and not very interesting. But if we don't talk about any music theory, we end up with a musician that's not really a musician, right? You need to understand a little bit about this stuff. So the circle of fifths is an incredibly powerful tool. And a lot of people, they might say, well, I never teach the circle of fifths, or well, I never learned the circle of fifths. It's like, well, maybe that's because you've already internalized the information, so you never saw that you need it because you already just do it automatically. And that's great, but some people don't do it automatically, so it's good to understand a little about it. Okay, if you look at notes on a piano keyboard, it starts way on one end and goes over to the other end. And every once in a while you have repeated notes. But none of those are organized in a way that shows you necessarily what goes together in songs, at least as far as chords are concerned. Because if we're in the key of C, we're going to need C and F and G. We talked about that in the previous video, right? If we're in the key of G, we're going to need a G and a D and a C. We talked about that in the previous video. For the key, and those notes don't appear to be next to each other. They don't appear to be related, but they absolutely are. And if you diagram them on a circle of fifths, let me show you just briefly what we have here so you know where I'm looking at in the book. If we're on page 22, you take all the notes like that and string them out in a row. And then if you just took every so often, you'd get one of those notes. And if you took one of those notes and arranged it in a circular pattern, you end up with a repeating pattern. And that's a very powerful pattern. As we move forward here through this section, I'm not going to do like 15 lessons on circle of fifths, but this is valuable stuff, especially if you don't already know it. So you end up with major chords on the outside, minor chords on the inside, and songs that go to, or chords that go together in songs. There's a list of a whole bunch of songs on whatever page that is, page 24. But the most important part is that diagram right there. If you look at that, and let's say we're in the key of C, we're going to need probably F and G, and we might need one of these other chords. If we're in a Western song. If we're in Hawaiian songs, it's different. We're going to talk about that in a second. But just knowing that pattern, if you're in the key of C, you need those chords. If you're in the key of G, you just shift that wedge-shaped pattern until it's centered on the key of G. That's a really useful skill. If you wanted to write a song and make a song that sounded good, you could use C, F, and G. If we're in the key of C, according to the circle of fifths, those chords are right next to each other, so they're going to sound good. And that's how they got songs like La Bamba, right? And that's how they got songs like Twist and Shout, which is exactly the same song. Da la 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 bamba, twist and shout. It's the same thing, but if you look at it from a music theory point of view, it's like, why do those chords sound so good? Why have they been used for hundreds of years? It's because there's actually a mathematical reason for it. You can study this more on different YouTube videos if you want to. We're not going to go that deep, but this is just a simple explanation of, look, those chords sound good. What about the minor chords? What if we've got C, and let's take the one in the middle there, just inland from the C, we'd have the A minor, then we could go to F, and then back to the G. How many songs sound like this? Like a million of them, right? In fact, there's a list there of a whole bunch of songs that use that kind of chords. It's a 1, then we have the 6 minor added in, and then the 4, and the 5. So the 1 is the C, 6 minor is the relative minor there, F, and we have the G. What if we just take all those 6 chords and put them together in a seemingly random order and see if we can come up with something that sounds plausibly good? More importantly, let's find out if we could even come up with something that sounded plausibly bad. So long as we stay in that western wedge, these chords are related, so they're going to tend to sound good, whether we want them to or not. So let's start here, and we'll go to here, we'll go to here. Now let's take one of those inner chords, we'll take another inner chord, and another one, and back to the outer ring, back to where we started on a C. Yeah, that sounded pretty good, right? That was a 6-chord song. I might have accidentally played any one of 100 songs there. What I did was, I played, I'll call it the chords this time. I've got a C, then I think I went to a G, then I think I went to the other side, F, then I did the inner chords, A minor, then I did a D minor, then I did an E minor, then I went back to the outer chords, F, and the other side, G, and then I went back to where I started on C. All I'm doing is I'm playing chords within that western wedge. If you want to write a song, that's a way to make a song that sounds good. That's like, because it's so hard to sound bad, because these are related items. Of course they're going to work well together in music, and that's why so much of music sounds good. And if you understand this pattern, when you're presented with a song in a Kanakapila scenario, maybe you don't know that song, maybe you've never heard that song, maybe you've never played that song, but you know we're in the key of, let's say, in this case, C. You already know all the building blocks you need to make that song. It's not that hard. Like, once you know how to work with a frying pan, a little bit of butter, and eggs, you can make all sorts of different things. Somebody says, make scrambled eggs. You're in an unfamiliar kitchen. Can you make scrambled eggs in an unfamiliar kitchen? Probably. You open the refrigerator, look for the butter, open the cabinet, look for a frying pan, find some eggs, and you're off and running, right? It's just basics. But if you understand how the basics fit together and why they're related and the frequency with which they're related, that's a huge asset to you. Another thing this will do is it will teach you keys that you probably shouldn't play in a Kanakapila scenario. Like, for example, that one there. That would be playing in the key of A flat. Can I play in the key of A flat? Sure I can. Do I want to? No, because then I need to play A flat, D flat, E flat, F minor, C minor, D something minor. What is that? Can't even read that. Oh, sorry, that's a B flat minor. I don't have my glasses on. The point being, it's like, do I know those chords? Yeah. Do I use them frequently? No. Why not? Because if I'm in a Kanakapila scenario jamming with somebody, I don't want to throw them a whole bunch of chords they don't know. That's no fun. That's like trying to have a conversation with somebody in a language that they don't speak. Like, you just wouldn't go into a room and start speaking French to everybody in the room if you knew that nobody else spoke French. That would be weird, right? I mean, it's not exactly rude, but it's weird. It turns out I don't speak French, and I have no idea if you speak French, but it's just an example. We could use any language. But if you imagine picking a language that people don't speak, you just don't do that. And in Kanakapila, you don't do it either. You generally want to pick things where people can play along with you, because that's the whole point. And in Hawaiian music, mostly we want to be playing together as much as we can. Now, what happens in the Hawaiian genre of music that's different, that throws people off? And what throws people off is the vamp. So how do we find a vamp on a circle of fifths in any key? Well, let's start in the key of C. There's a diagram there for it on page 25. I'll show it to you here quickly. It's the green part. So the blue, we still have that blue wedge shape from before, but here we added, there's the D7, there's the G7, and then you go back to a C. Now we had that on page 21 on the Kanakapila chord chart too, but this is just showing you how it fits together in music theory. What if we're not in that key? Let's say we're in the key of F. Well, there's an example of the key of F. You're centered, the blue wedge centers around the F, but we also have, now would have G7, C7, F. So that would be how to do, I mean, you've got every vamp in all 12 keys right there. Just boom, piece of cake, just by having access to a circle of fifths. So you don't need to memorize as much as you think you do. if you understand how this fits together. The other thing is if you practice your chords in a certain sequence, that's going to make it way, way, way easier to jam. For example, if you've practiced, somebody says, oh, we're going to do it in the key of F. You're like, oh, no, I don't ever play in the key of F. Well, if you've practiced the chords on page 21 in these sequences, these chords are going to come off your fingers just like, because you've practiced that 100 times. G7, C7, F, because that's what it says on the Cornucopia of the chord chart. That's the hula vamp. And what might come before that would be a D7 maybe. That's the upstream for that key if you refer back to page 21. Or if you refer to the circle of fifths, there it is right there. It's just one step farther around. So G7 would go to G7, would go to C7, would go to F. And this stuff is not that complicated once you understand that it's not random. See, a lot of people, it seems to me, they enter into this, and because they're used to looking at one chord at a time, they're used to looking at, here's the book, here's the chord it says to play, so I'm going to play that chord, but you're not looking at how that chord relates to all the rest of the chords in the whole song. The more you look at it as, here's a family of chords, and they're all working together in a certain key, the easier it is to have a sense of what's going to come next, and it makes it way, way, way easier to play. So I really strongly encourage you to learn music that way. If we were to move on beyond page 25 to page 26, see if we can get this in one video without making it too long. Here's a diagram of the current flow, and all that means is if you're on this, it's going to tend to go to that, it's going to tend to go to that, it's going to tend to go to that, it's going to tend to go to that. That's just the natural flow of the circle of fifths. We call this side up here the light side, because those are chords we like to play. We call this side over here the dark side, because that's chords we don't always like to play. What is this describing? This is describing the upstream concept from page 21. If we're in the key of C, we're going to need mostly C, F, and G. And then suddenly in a Hawaiian song, you get, whoa, a A7. What comes after that? You could look at your circle of fifths, or you could refer back to page 21. If you're in the key of C in a Hawaiian song and suddenly you get an A7, what comes next? Probably D7. What comes next? Probably G7. What comes next? Probably C. And that's why we arrange the chords, if you want to practice them. If we're in the key of C, look, there's A7, D7, G7, C. So practice those chords in that sequence. And suddenly, a lot of this music gets really, really easy. So look at these chords as families that go together. There's a lot more information in here. I can't read it all, but another way to look at it is it looks just like a kitchen timer, if you even know what one of those is. Kitchen timer. Remember, you wind it up, and it goes tick-a, 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 tick, ting, right? Wind it up again. Tick-a, 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 tick, ting. Kitchen timers don't look like that anymore, but they used to, and if you know how one of those things works, you'll know how circle of fifths works, especially in Hawaiian music, because that definitely is the tendency. Page 27 talks about, basically, I'm going to look at it as like proving that I'm right. Because it's not that I'm right, I'm just pointing out to you tendencies in music, and if you understand these tendencies, it makes it way easier. There are examples at the bottom of page 27, songs that don't seem to follow this pattern. Hua olena, do 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 do. Yeah, that's true. That's an exception. Kipa Hulu is another one, doesn't follow that. Lots of songs don't follow this, but most songs do follow that. So if you get used to following the basic pattern, the 90% of the songs, get good at those, that's a really easy way to get good at most of what you run into. And then every once in a while, you learn the exceptions. And then you can throw the exceptions in, and it's a piece of cake. Mostly in those cases, because there's a minor chord in the song. Okay, then we're going to get to, next video is going to be the stuff that I really wanted to get to teach Pa'ani, how to play a solo. right, thanks everybody. We made it through the music theory. Congratulations. Hopefully you're a little bit more of musicians now rather than just I have an ukulele in my hands and I'm making sound with it. The difference between a musician and merely an instrumentalist is what can they do in different scenarios is really a lot of how I would look at that. So if you understand those pages we just covered, you'll be way, way, way better at lots of other scenarios. Mahalo.